Oh, wow. And I'm back with the amazing, the genius, the incomparable Dr. Guy Chet. And I was given some information and some developments on the conflict in the Middle East.
Big news, yes.
And I was in the midst of asking for some clarity. And I was like, you know what? So many people have such a so many Americans, let me just change that. So many Americans have such a limited understanding of what is going on over there and how it not only affects Israel and Palestine, but all of the Arab nations surrounding Israel. And I understand that I, Iraq or Iran have taken a formal,
Iran. Yep.
Iraq has taken
Iran.
a,
Iran with an N.
Iraq has taken a, they've joined in. They began to attack Israel.
So you mean today? I didn't hear anything today.
Well, what? Wait a minute. Let me make sure I know it. I thought
I
that there was an Iranian attack on Israel. I
like two
thought that
weeks
was
ago. Yeah, 2 weeks
yes,
ago. Yeah.
right. And I thought I don't know why I'm turning yellow.
Yeah, I didn't know why. I didn't do
I
it.
don't know. All right, we'll just be yellow today. Um. So my question to you was, why is the war expanding? And you explained to me that whoever claims leadership over the Arab slash Muslim world takes leadership in the war of the Jewish state.
Yeah. So
And
here,
they play the
let
role
me
of the
let me first of all
sponsor.
first of all your color came back to your cheeks. That's good.
Ah,
No more yellow. But let me share an image just so that all the viewers can see what the region we're talking about is. Okay. All right. Can you see the entire Middle East from,
yes,
okay, you can see all the countries and
yes.
nothing is
Turkey,
cut off?
Iran, Iraq, Syria, Jordan,
Great.
Saudi.
Perfect. Okay. So here, when you see my cursor, this pink thing, this is Israel. So
Right.
Muslim, this is the Muslim Middle East, and in the heart of it is this small thing called Israel. And here is a close-up just on Israel. So this section here with Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Egypt there's a close-up here so you can see, well, see a close-up. But this is the context of everything you're seeing. And as you can see, Iran is many countries away. It's far away from Israel. It has nothing to do with the Palestinians. The Palestinians are Arabs. The Iranians are Persians. The Palestinians are Sunni Muslims. The Iranians are Shiite Muslims. The Iranians have no territorial claims in Israel. So the conflict clearly is not about the conflict between Iran and Israel is clearly not about territorial claims or you hurt me, I hurt you. It's about something else. And the same goes
Okay.
for Iran's proxy armies, for example, the Hezbollah in Lebanon and or the Houthis in Yemen here. But okay, so I just wanted to show the map so people will have
That
a
helps.
visual sense of what we're talking about.
That helps. So if they're that far away, this is not necessarily a religious kin. This is not a border kin. This is not a governmental kin. Why is Israel being attacked by Iran?
So, um, Israel is Jewish. The Arab and Muslim world around it is Muslim. And in Islam, at least Islam as it is now constituted and for the past hundreds of years, um, there is a religious doctrine that for whatever reason, I'm not an Islamic scholar or anything, but just I take it, take the final product, um, Jewish statehood, Jewish sovereignty in the heart of the Middle East, in what is considered Muslim territory, is offensive to Islam. So, and then there's also a territorial conflict between the Arabs in this little pink space here, between those Arabs who call themselves Palestinians now, and between the Jews. But since the beginning of the State of Israel, Arab countries or Muslim countries have kind of taken their way of taking the lead in the Muslim world, their way of claiming leadership in the Muslim world was by taking the lead in the fight against the Jewish state. So when
Even if they're
Israel,
different, even if they're different type of Muslims.
yes. So for example, I'm not going to go to this, not a history lesson, professional habit. Um, so when Israel was formed, so Israel declared independence. The British, who were the occupying force, left, and the next day, five Arab armies invaded Israel. So from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. Um, so and thinks maybe a contingent of Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure. In any case, and from that point on, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, the two countries that tried to vie for leadership in the Arab world were Syria and Egypt, and there Jordan fell out very quickly, and so they competed with one another over who would be the lead force in leading Arab armies into Israel to conquer it and disperse and recapture it from the invading Jews. Um, and then in the 1970s and 80s, because Israel won those wars and because of Cold War politics, Egypt kind of dropped its leadership role in terms of anti-Israel leadership. And meanwhile, and Syria also declined simply because Israel had won its previous wars against it, and Syria had many internal problems. And at the same time, Iran, if you remember in the Islamic Revolution, toppled its king, its secular king, and proclaimed an Islamic republic. And Iran is Shiite, as you know, whereas most of the rest of the Middle East so Iran is Persian and Shiite, so ethnically Persian rather than Arab, and religiously Shiite Muslim rather than Sunni Muslim like the Arab countries here.
Okay.
And so then part of the jockeying for leadership in the Muslim world between the leading Sunni powers, especially Saudi Arabia, and the rising Shiite power, was who claims leadership in the war against the infidels, against the Jews. And so it was kind of this leadership between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And over the decades, Iran has claimed the lead. It established proxy Shiite armies in Lebanon, in Yemen, against Saudi Arabia, and against Israel. And in any case, and so the war against Israel, from wherever it comes, is a Muslim war against the Jews. But so the war is not expanding in the sense that it's just whoever is leading the Muslim world or claiming leadership also takes the lead in this Islamic war against the infidel in the Holy Land.
What is okay? First question. If Israel is surrounded by the Muslim world, well, now with the exception of Egypt, because Egypt is no longer in hostility against
So
Israel.
Egypt and Jordan now both have peace treaties with Israel,
Okay.
but but
but being
but but
surrounded with these.
I
Okay.
just want to clarify. So they do have peace treaties with Israel and have for decades now. But
Okay.
all the weaponry that came in, so here, this red little thing is the Gaza Strip where the fighting began now. Do you
Hmm.
see the cursor?
Yes.
So all the weaponry that Hamas got and all the other kind of offensive or weapons of war that they got, where did they get them from? They didn't get them from Israel. They got them from Egypt.
Mm.
Okay. By the same token, all the weaponry that that Hamas and the PLO or Fatah get in their terrorist attacks that they launch from this area, Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, all the weapons they get, where do they get it? Again, they don't get it from Israel, they get it from Jordan. So these countries that are nominally at peace with Israel, they're still Arabs, they're still Muslims. The peace treaties with Israel are kind of a necessity because of Cold War politics or post-Cold War politics, relations with the US. For whatever reason, peace with Israel has been beneficial to them diplomatically, politically, financially, economically, but they're still collaborating with Israel's enemies in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Lebanon, wherever. So,
Mm.
but they are nominally at peace with
One
Israel.
second. I think that's my light that's making me yellow.
Yeah, it's like a light show.
Okay, that was driving me crazy. Okay, so if Egypt is funding or supporting Hamas over their peace treaty, Jordan is doing the same. Syria is relatively hostile. Saudi, Iraq, Iran, Turkey. How can small Israel fight off this surrounding hostility? It would just seem like it would just be a takeover. What is
Yeah, so Israel, you have to remember, is the largest economy in the Middle East.
I didn't know that.
Maybe Turkey is bigger, not sure, but in case
Not
one of the
Saudi?
pardon.
Not Saudi?
No, Saudi Arabia has a very it's got the oil fields, the oil industry, but its economy is not a modern economy. It's quite a primitive economy.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
so Israel has the the strongest economy in the region, maybe with the exception of Turkey, I'm not sure. Um, and the strongest or second strongest army in the region after
Mm,
Turkey. So, so because Israel is in a very hostile environment for ever since its inception, it has had to fortify itself with it, it's got, as you can see, it's got no strategic depth. If you invade it, that's it. So, so Israel has cultivated its educational system, its economy, its military research and development, its economy in agriculture, high tech, industry, et cetera, et cetera. And the result is that Israel is a very strong economic power and a very strong military power, and whereas the countries around it are, look, if you just look around, Syria crumbling. For a while, for its first few decades, it was under a very strong military dictatorship, and then it fell apart because these are almost all of these countries, with the exception of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and most of these Gulf principalities or kingdoms, most of these countries are drawn by European power. We're drawn by European powers. Okay, so Syria was just, somebody drew a line on a map, but it includes all these different ethnicities and religions. Same goes for Iraq, as we know. It broke up along religious and along sectarian and ethnic lines. Um, Egypt and Saudi Arabia and these Gulf uh, principalities are more ethnically, yeah, unified, and so they're most
Right.
stable. And so part of, and Turkey also has serious problems with ethnic strife. Iran certainly does. So these countries have a lot of internal problems. They're also economically backwards. Um, we can argue, we can debate why they're economically backward. One of the features is that they're very dictatorial regimes, and therefore they have a very dictatorial or an unfree economy. So, okay, so for whatever reasons, the Arab or Muslim region did not develop well or strongly economically, whereas Israel did, and that allowed Israel, despite its tiny size and tiny numbers, Israel is about 10 million. These countries are like, I don't know, 60 million here, 80 million here. I don't know exactly the numbers, but
Right.
the numbers are overwhelmingly stronger than Israel. But Israel has an economic and military advantage that allows it to
Exists.
counteract its strategic vulnerability.
Now, okay, let's say, what is the end game of Israel? Because now having an understanding that the issue is not exclusively with the area identified as Palestine, this is an Arab Muslim Jewish issue.
Yes, it's a
Well,
religious war. It's a
well,
religion.
yeah. So if
Yeah,
I get rid of Hamas, I have the rest of the Palestinians that were related to them or whatever. So if I get rid of all of them, the people who even believe in Hamas, I gotta I have a new generation of Palestinians that are now upset with me. If I get rid of Palestinians, Hamas, I got Iran, I have Iraq, I have Syria, I got Jordan, I got Egypt.
right,
Where what's the end game? How does
right. Look, that's a great observation that the the reason why the prospects for peace between the Arabs or Muslims and the Jews is so bleak is that there's a complete asymmetry between how each side can achieve success. Okay, achieve what it wants, and that asymmetry dictates the prospect for peace. So the Arabs can achieve peace, achieve what they want by winning one war against Israel. Okay, they came close to winning a war with Israel at Israel's founding in 1948, and then again in 1973 when there's Egypt. Here, I'll point on the map again. In 1973, Egypt and Syria. In 1967, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria coordinated their armies and waged a war against Israel combined. Israel won that war spectacularly, and that's when up until then, Israel, if you look at the close-up, Israel was just this blue part. And then in that 1967 war, the Six Days War, Israel conquered the Golan Heights from Syria, Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank from
Mhm.
Jordan, and then the Gaza Strip and the entire Sinai Peninsula, this part here, from Egypt. And then later on, it gave the Sinai back to Egypt for the peace treaty. Okay, so in 67, there was a combined war of these three armies. So in the 1948 war, Israel's War of Independence, five Arab armies combined to wage war against Israel. In the 1967 war, three countries. In the 1973 war, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack, and Israel was surprised in the same way that it was surprised on October 7th. And and the Arabs came close to winning that war. So um, so for the Arabs to be successful in what they want to achieve, they have to win one war, which again they came close to doing. If they ever win one war against Israel, they can kill the Jews or evict the Jews or simply subjugate the Jews as they subjugate other religious minorities in Arab countries. And that'll solve the Arabs' problem with Israel. Okay, and then there'll be peace.
Is it that they don't want an Israel, or
Yes,
they
they
want to
don't want a
control
Jewish.
Israel? Why not just say, okay, you guys been here for 100 years. You do you, we do us. What's
Okay.
the end game if they take, if okay, if do they want to govern it? What's
Yes,
the
it is.
what's
It
the
is
point?
Muslim. You see, you're not a Muslim, so you don't know these things. The
No.
end game is to liberate Muslim land. This is Muslim land
Ah,
as far as they're concerned. Okay? The Jews are invaders, and therefore the Jews need to go, either be kicked out or be killed or be subjugated. You know, because there are religious minorities in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Syria, but they have to. They're a subjugated community. Um, I mean, there are no Jews in these countries. They've all been kicked out. But so again, so we don't know what the Arabs will do if they ever conquer Israel. Will they kill them? Will they evict them? Or will they subjugate them? But for the Arabs to get what they want and for there to therefore be peace, they have to win one war against Israel. By contrast, the Israelis cannot solve their problem the same way. No matter how strong the Israeli army can ever become, and how many times it wins, and no matter how many times it wins wars against the Arabs, it cannot conquer all these Arab Arab lands around it. Okay,
right,
that is simply not an option. So 7 million Jews cannot kill, expel, or subjugate 400 million Arabs, or add to that Muslims in Turkey and Iran and wherever. So, so the horizon of imaginable success is very different from each side. The Arabs can imagine what a military imposed solution looks like. The Jews cannot. Okay, for the Jews to achieve success, they have to achieve acceptance from the Arab world. And that explains the two sides' completely different approaches to the conflict. The Arabs can wait. Okay, wait for an opportunity when Israel weakens for one reason or another, or when they develop sufficient strength, or maybe develop a nuclear weapon in Iran, or who knows what. Uh, and they know if we have patience, Israel cannot be strong forever. Countries are not strong forever. So all they have to do is wait for an opportunity, defeat Israel once, and until then, they will live with this annoying and humiliating effrontery of a Jewish state. The Israeli approach is to simply wait for the Arabs to eventually accept that the Jews are not foreign invaders, to accept that the Jews are the indigenous people of that land. And because Israel cannot impose peace militarily on 400 million Arabs, they have to live on their sword in the hope that eventually, after 5 wars, 10 wars, 50 wars, 100 wars, someday the Arabs will accept that the Jews are not colonizers, they're not invaders, they're not crusaders, but they are local people, ancient people who have returned home as the Quran identifies, as the Bible identifies, that they are the people of that region and will accept them, and then there will be peace. So again, so for the Jews to imagine the end game that you're talking about, they have to imagine a complete shift in the thinking of Arabs and Muslims. Whereas for
now,
the
going back to your book, and this is another reason why Americans are having a hard time understanding. And I should have your book. Oh, your book.
Yes.
When we're talking about Jews, Americans think you. We think the European looking, fair, fairer skinned Jewish genotype, which in your book is what you were saying. That's not what you're going to see when we're talking about the Israeli Jews. These are people that are melanated. These are people that
Mixed.
was that
It,
it's a
it's
mix.
mixed. Yeah. So in
Yeah,
Israel, 40% roughly of Israeli Jews are of European extraction, and about 60% are of uh, Asian, Middle Eastern, African extraction.
right,
So when you walk around in Israel, American Jew, virtually all American Jews look like me, look like Bernie Sanders, like Jerry Seinfeld,
right.
um, and have their religious background and everything else. Um, and so in Israel, about 40% of the Jews are like that, and 60% of the Jews are more brown skin or even black skin, and have a different cultural background, a more Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, North African cultural background. So it's a it's a mix, and I'm sorry,
So
Israeli Jews look different, have a different cultural makeup, different political makeup, different religious levels of religiosity than American Jews. It's a different Jewish culture
do they dress? Do they? Why are they? If they look more like the indigenous people of that area, why are they seen as colonizers? If the majority of them appear to be Middle Easterners,
because they're Jewish,
appearance,
because they're Jews. Look, Arab Arab Christians look exactly like Arab Muslims. Okay, why are they uh, subjugated, chased, killed, etc., etc.? It's not because, look, because Americans have this thing about race, that the fault line in American society is how you look. This guy's dark, this guy's light, and that marks the enmity.
okay?
In many, like if you look at the Kurds and the Turks or the Kurds and the Iranians or the different the Yazidis and the Iraqis, they look similar. It's not that one is white and one is black, but they do have a different ethnicity, even though they have the same skin color. They have a different religion. And they know maybe you cannot tell the difference. It's like,
That
look,
was my next question.
you cannot tell the difference between a Protestant Irishman and a Catholic Irishman. But you
Okay.
know who can tell the difference just by looking? A Catholic Irishman and a Protestant Irishman. They can tell one another apart. Same thing in the Middle East. The fact that they're Jewish is a problem for Jews in the Arab world. That's why, look, there's a reason why the Arab world, up until the formation of the State of Israel, had about 1 million Jews in it as subjugated minorities in there. Within 2 or 3 years, they were all kicked out. Okay, because of religious or ethnic, I mean, you would call it religious, they would call it ethnic uh, enmity. Okay, so so what they find objectionable about Jews. Yeah, I was going to say something. I was correcting midway. I was going to say what they find objectionable about Jews is the fact that they're Jewish, that they're infidels. But I'll attenuate that because
An infidel is anybody that's not
Muslim.
Muslim.
Yeah.
That's an infidel.
Yeah. But I'll
It's like the Jewish Gentile. Anybody that's not Jewish is Gentile.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Except that look, um the difference is, look, Islam, like Christianity, is a proselytizing religion. Okay. The end of time has all of humanity united in Islam. Just like in Christianity, the end of time has all of humanity united in Christianity. Okay. In the end. Yeah.
Right, right,
And
right.
and the religion, part of the mission of the faithful is to convert the the unfaithful, the non-Muslims, okay, to spread Islam or to spread Christianity. Judaism is a religion that forbids proselytizing. Okay, Judaism does not invite outsiders into the religion. It's an exclusive club. Okay, and so um, for Jews, Gentiles are not a problem. I mean, you're not part of us, but it's not a problem that you're not Jewish. Of course, you're not Jewish. Okay, the Jews are the chosen people. Other people are not. You know, so they're fine to continue in their own religions. For Islam and Christianity, the fact that you're not one of us is a problem. How Islam and Christianity deal with it is different, but it is a problem that the religious Muslim and the religious Christian is asked to do something about. Okay, to help non-Christians, non-Muslims overcome this problem. So in that respect, the fact that a Jew is a Jew is a problem, but that's not the issue here. The problem, that's why as soon as I said it, I started taking it back. Specifically, the problem here is not that Jews exist somewhere in the world, but rather that Jews have taken what they consider Muslim land and established sovereignty in it. Okay, so it's okay for Jews to live somewhere in Europe or North America.
Okay, so it's not because all these people are Semitic. So to say anti-Semitism is really
Look,
that's just really a whole nother
no, look, you have to
ball of
understand that
confusion.
yes,
But
look, the confusion,
it's
but
the land in particular. It's not a Jewish thing.
no, it is a, so um, so the term anti-Semitic is confusing because, like you said, the categories we
All of
have
them are Semitic.
of who is Semitic, you're right, but the term anti-Semitic originally originated in Europe, where the only Semitic people in Europe were Jews. And that's why the term anti-Jewish, I mean, they didn't come with the term anti-Jewish, they came with the term anti-Semitic because in a European context in the, what, 18th, 19th
Right,
century, they were the only Semitic people. So you and I can say anti-Semitic, but we understand that what it really means is anti-Jewish. Now, it
right.
is true that Muslims have an animosity towards Christians and an animosity towards Jews and an animosity towards pagans and an animosity towards a variety of others.
Oh,
Uh,
I've heard that being given. I've heard that stated as a given, but I have a question about that. From my understanding of the Quran, there are three Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And the Quran, by way of its, it actually praises the same God of Judaism and Christianity. And Christianity, the Old Testament of Christianity is Judaism. So why is it being represented or is it being misrepresented that it's people who follow Islam, the Muslim people, people who have submitted to Allah, are against Christianity or Judaism as principles when they are the final word in their belief system. They are the final word of those two books.
well, look, if you want to discuss it theologically, I can tell you that that the Quran dic dictates that Muslims subjugate Christians and Jews
Mm.
because they're infidels. Okay. Now, yes, they belong to they're a monotheistic faith, um, so they're not as objectionable as pagans. So pagans should be converted with the sword, should be killed or converted with the sword, according to the
So
Quran.
pagan
Uh,
is if you're not in
not
Abrahamic religion.
exactly. If you're not in the Abrahamic
Okay.
religions.
All right. All right.
By contrast, Jews and Christians are not to be converted with a sword, meaning converted or killed. Instead, they're allowed to live under Islamic rule and suffer certain subjugation, some certain um, it's called the dhimmi.
Control.
Called, yeah, they're a protected people, meaning that they're unlike pagans, they shouldn't be killed or converted, and they can keep their religions, but it's required that they be kind of second class citizens.
They're not the chosen people.
Yeah,
The
I mean it's not that, but yeah, they're okay. So in that respect, yes, they have a higher status than pagans, but they're infidels. Um, so that's theologically. But look, most people are not theologians. Okay? Most people just live in the world, and so my gauge of whether Muslims, are anti-Semitic is not what it says in the Quran, but
hmm,
what it says in opinion polls. And if you establish whatever it is, whatever standard you accept as, what is the definition of anti-Semitism to you? Like what parameters have to be met to match anti-Semitism? Opinion polls in the Arab and Muslim world, I think will satisfy you that Arabs and Muslims have a higher degree than any other religious or ethnic group of anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic views. So, so on the one hand, again, going back to what is their problem with the Jews, number one, it's a general problem that they're infidels. Number two, there's also, on top of that, there's a particular animus towards Jews because of anti-Semitism or anti-Jewishness. But then the specific problem is of Jews being sovereign over Muslim land. Okay,
wow.
so if the Jews if the Jews in Israel could be kicked out or killed, um, and would just all move to North America, let's say, then Islam will eventually have to convert them. And yeah, and yes, I don't like those people because of whatever anti-Semitic image that they have in their minds, but it's not a burning it's not a humiliation
They're
that
going to
Jews
follow.
exist. Yeah, pardon?
Right. They're not going to
Yeah,
follow him
yeah, they're not going to
to
follow them.
the
The
Yeah.
fact, yeah, exactly. But the fact that look, the Jews' role in a Muslim society is to be a second-class citizen, just like the Christian. Okay, it's to be subjugated.
Mm.
Okay,
So
before this,
just
let me just finish this one.
okay.
Before the state of Israel was formed, like I said, there were 1 million Jews in these Arab and Muslim lands,
Right.
and they lived, they
No problem.
they survived as long as they knew their place in as not on top. Okay, the Muslims were on
Right.
top, the Jews and Christians were on the bottom. Fine. All of a sudden, when the state of Israel was formed, the Jews are on top. That is, if you
Inconceivable.
think of it kind of like think of it. I hate to make comparisons to America, but think of a very traditional society where men are on top and women are on the bottom. They know their place, they're subjugated, and they all live perfectly in harmony, knowing who's on top and who's on the bottom. And all of a sudden, the women in one
In
village
Rhode Island.
in Rhode Island, exactly, the women are on top, and and the men are on the bottom of it. It is it's an upside down world. It offends not just cultural sensibilities, but also religious dictates. And so beyond the fact, again, they don't like infidels, they don't like Jews in particular. Fine, if they're far away, it doesn't matter. But the fact that they are here among us in a Muslim land, what Muslims think is a Muslim territory, they are on top, and not only are they on top, they are ruling over a Muslim minority and an Arab minority. It's offensive. Okay, it's humiliating. And so the real problem on top of Jews and infidels is Jews on top in the heart of the Middle East.
For that matter, it really isn't a religious war because this is not about doctrine. This is more political.
Look, one of the definitions of Islamism as opposed to Islam, and I'm not a political scientist, and I discourage anyone from going in that direction. But the way that political scientists define Islamism as opposed to Islam is that it's political Islam. Okay, this mix of politics and religion. The reason why I don't buy that, I don't like that explanation or definition, is that that definition where religion and politics are separate, but then you have this weird thing where they're combined, and we call that Islamism. That works in the Western world, where we've developed this ideology where, hey, religion is separation of church and state, religion is private, the state is political. In most of the world, that division doesn't exist to begin with. So in 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 Islamic in Muslim countries,
That is law.
is Islam is political, and in Islamist countries, what we call Islam, it's also combined. So the trying to divide it, is it religious? Is it political? I think Westerners need to explain that to themselves. Is it this or is it this? Whereas I think most people in the old world, it wouldn't occur to them to ask, what is it? Because of course it's both. It's a mix of everything.
Right. I've always heard of Jewish principles as Jewish law. I've always heard of Islamic principles as Islamic law.
Right.
And
Actually, that's a good, I didn't think of it. In Christianity, because Christianity is a religion of the heart, not a religion of do's and don'ts, there's no such thing as Christian law.
right,
Okay. Christianity is about is wholly spiritual. Um, whereas in Islam and in Judaism, the the religion is the code of the religion is what you do and what you don't do, and meaning what is dictated by law and what is forbidden by law, by religious law.
it's a social
So,
code as well as a spiritual code.
right, and so I think maybe the separation that we in the West are trying to establish, is it religion, is it law, is it political? It reflects a Christian mentality in which law and conduct are separate from religion. Religion is spiritual and inward.
Based on what you're telling me, this two-state resolution is not only improbable, it's impossible because it doesn't address the real issue of citizenship or class, caste, or citizenship.
Right?
You
Look,
are in the wrong place. If you are dominating any land here, that's a problem. It doesn't
I'll,
matter if it's two states, it doesn't matter.
right.
You're going to have a problem with one of these, be it Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Saudi, or
With
Iran.
all of them, look, and I'll give you, I mean, I'll demonstrate it to you. So
Okay.
all the two-state solutions, okay, there have been five official pushes towards this two-state solution in the 1930s, before the State of Israel was formed, in 1947, when the partition plan was presented to the United Nations, and then in 1967, right after the Six-Day War, when Israel captured these three territories here, and then again in the 1990s and early 2000s. And in all of them, the the Jews kind of suggested it or agreed to it, and the Arabs in all five
You can
cases
take the
said
map down now. Take the
said
map
no.
down
Okay.
so you see us.
Uh, I'll just use it for this to illustrate.
Okay.
After this, we'll take it down. So
Hmm.
um, so the two-state solutions, all of them that have been offered, have some sort of version that looks like, without being too picky about the actual lines, that the Jewish state will look something like what's here in blue,
Right.
and the Arab state will look something like what's here in red. And these are what's called the 1967 borders. Okay, with some adjustment and maybe some sort of connection between these two red parts, and but some sort of deal here. Now, there are two problems with that. First of all, there still be a Jewish state, which is offensive for all the reasons we just mentioned. And number two, you can see that the Arabs rejected it every time. Okay, so this is not an acceptable thing to them. And these borders, what's called the 1967 borders, were the borders before 1967. Right? So if you could have, like if the claim now is, if Israel just agreed to go back to the 1967 borders, we can have
Same
some
thing.
sort of two-state solutions. And you from the side, you can look at, wait, but Israel was in the 1967 borders for 20 years before 1967. Okay. And the Arab wars and the Palestinian liberation movement, they existed before 1967. So there's an inherent problem here, in that the Jews insist on having a Jewish state in what they consider their homeland, and the Arabs insist that the Jews are not from here, do not belong here, they're not in their homeland, they're in our homeland, and they need to get out. And
So this
and
is not as we are being Americans, when I say we, as we are being informed, this is actually a misinformation that this is an Israel Palestine conflict. It just happens to be Palestine this time.
oh yeah, you're right. It's a religious it's a religious problem, or again, if it's a Jewish problem. Okay, the Muslims, the Arabs have a problem with a Jewish state. Okay, so uh, right now, so at times it's a conflict between the Jews and the Palestinians. At times it's a conflict between the Jews and the Palestinians and the Egyptians and the Syrians and the Jordanians. At times it's a problem between the Jews and the Palestinians and the Saudis. At times it's a problem between the Jews and the Palestinians and the Iranians. But it's in the Arabs, the Muslims have a doctrinal religious problem with a Jewish state. They have an ethnic or anti-Semitic problem with the Jewish state, and therefore that problem will not be solved by a two-state solution. And
Okay.
it's
So
why
we
the
got
solution
four
was
minutes
rejected.
left. And what I want you to do is I need you to I need you to wrap up this last question. And I want them to see you better. So let's take
Yes,
the map down.
stop sharing.
And
Yeah.
what has the Arab nations said, if you do this, we're okay? What has been the they won't do this or is it they won't go away? Is that
So the two countries that have made peace with Israel, Egypt and Jordan, um, what they wanted from Israel was to what they wanted from the United States was to establish good diplomatic and economic relations between Egypt. So a little bit of background. During the Cold War, the Arab world was part of the Soviet bloc, and Israel was part of the Western American bloc. And as the Cold War progressed towards the collapse of the Soviet Union, the economy, the level of support from the Soviet Union for the Arab countries diminished, and the ability of them to help the Arab countries win a war, fight wars against Israel diminished because the Soviet Union was collapsing. And so increasingly countries looked to move away from the Soviet Union and establish ties with the United States. And a good way to do that was to make peace with Israel or reduce the enmity, the hostility to Israel. And so Egypt did it first, Saudi Arabia and Jordan did it. And so now Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia are have taken their foot off the gas with regard to enmity to Israel. Their populations are still very hostile to Israel and to Jews, but their governments are uh,
Keeping them at
neutral
bay.
towards Israel or even friendly-ish towards Israel because they want to be friendly with the United States. So that's what they want. But if you ask the average Egyptian or the average Jordanian or Saudi, what do you want to happen in Israel? Want the Jews to go away or die, and for this land to return to Muslim hands. And that's certainly true of other Arab and Muslim countries or the Turks. They sincerely believe that the Jews are crusaders. Okay? They're invaders, they're colonizers, and just like we did with the Crusaders, if it takes 100 years, if it takes 200 years, if it takes 500 years, we will fight them and fight them. And eventually, like the Crusaders, they will lose. And once they lose once,
Gone.
it's done.
Now, 2 minutes. You said there's always been an indigenous Jewish population there, even when they weren't in control of the government, right?
But very small. About 2,000 years, the Jews were exiled by the Romans. That's when the name of the country, the name Palestine is a name that the Romans, so this country was called originally Israel or Judea, and then in Roman times it was called Judea. And then when the Romans put down the Jewish rebellion, there were two or three Jewish rebellions against the Romans. When the Romans eventually suppressed the rebellion and exiled the Jews, they changed the name of the country from Judea, from the word Jew, to Palestine as part of an effort to stamp out the Jewish presence, to disconnect the Jews from this land, exiling the Jews, changing the name. Jews were forbidden to enter Jerusalem. Um, and so when the Jews were in exile for 2,000 years, maybe a few 100,000 Jews were left. And then by the end, by the, I don't know, 17th, 18th century, I think only about 100,000, maybe even less. So there was always a Jewish presence, but by the Ottoman period, it really was just maybe 100,000, maybe fewer. But the Jews are kind of like, if you think of it, they're kind of like some tribe in Oklahoma that was exiled from its ancestral lands in Florida, in the Trail of Tears or Kansas, wherever they went. Um, and so they lived in the diaspora, wherever, but they still remembered themselves and thought of themselves as we are in exile. This is not our home.
Right.
Kansas
We're
is not our home.
Seminoles
Florida
and
is
we
our
want to
home.
go
So
back to North
exactly.
Florida.
And so the Jews think of themselves as natives of Florida in this case, okay, of
Right.
Israel. The people who have come to live in Florida in the meantime, the Arabs who have come to live in the land of Israel, in the Holy Land, they think, yeah, those people are gone. We're now natives. Okay, so there are two peoples here who think that they are indigenous to this land, and that's why they fight.
With the influx of American young people and scholars trying to understand this conflict, what do you consider to be the credible sources for people to get unbiased, accurate information on the history of this conflict? Where do they go to get this information?
This podcast, the Darnell Bolton podcast, right here. Um, look, I can't tell you in English. Maybe Bernard Lewis. I don't know. The history that I've absorbed is mostly in Hebrew, and from my own experience.
Tell me in Hebrew.
Pardon?
Whatever, however you have to tell it, tell it. I mean, I'm sure there are people who will understand. I mean, maybe the
I'll
average
tell you what.
American.
I will look for the titles that I think of in English, and I'll send them to you, and you can post them to the text below on YouTube.
Sounds good.
But
Yeah, you can
um,
put it in.
but look, the thing is, this is such a contentious issue, and you will just hear a lot of you'll read a lot of sincere and partial histories. They'll give you parts of the history. Okay. And so the there's two ways to make sense of this conflict. One, if you have the time and interest to read, 10 different accounts and watch, uh, I know, television and podcasts covering kind of a range of positions, and then you make sense of which makes more sense to you. But that requires you to become a scholar of the region and of the history. I think a different way to look at it is to try to identify for yourself who is the um, to just take people at their word. Okay, don't listen to what Western people are telling you about what Arabs in the Middle East think. Don't ask Arab Americans or Jewish Americans to tell you what Arabs in the Middle East or Jews in the Middle East think. Again, if you can't travel there, obviously just look at opinion surveys over there. Look at what those people or those governments are saying. That's a more credible source than what Westerners are telling you, not because Westerners are lying to you, but because
Don't
Westerners
know.
are Westerners. Okay?
Right.
And what Westerners are doing for you is they're translating what, I mean,
What somebody else
rendering
feels and thinks.
exactly. And so they're rendering it to you with Western concepts, like, for example, the framework of skin color, or is it religion or politics? It's okay, so it's not going to help you. It's going to further obfuscate. Try to listen again. If you don't know Hebrew and you don't know Arabic, then read translations of opinion polls or people on the street or whatever else. So if you don't have time to really deeply study the topic academically, just listen to people who are there, and they'll give you a sense of what each country or what each people is like, what they want. And I think what you'll see is this, again, this disparity that for the Arabs to succeed, all they have to do, the Arabs can imagine success because all they have to do is wait for an opportunity and win one war, and then there'll be peace because the Jews will be gone. Whereas for the Jews, to imagine success is so fantastical because they have to imagine that the Arab and Muslim world, which now have a religious and ethnic and religious, a religious and ethnic and kind of anti-Semitic problem with Jews in the heart of the Middle East, that they will somehow be changed theologically and in their anti-Jewish attitudes. And that's a long wait. And so Israel just has to continue
I
doing
got
what
a
it's
million.
doing
I
and
have a million more questions, but we're like 10 minutes
next
over
time.
time.
Yeah,
Um, we got to do it again. We got to do it again because I really am interested in your experience because you were in the Israeli military. Like everybody has to be in the military, right?
right. Yeah,
And I just really would like to know how you feel when you hear this, when you see this. It's like, oh my God, not again, or yep, here we go. Um, it's a lot like I would imagine how when there's just another police shooting of a deaf black man. Well, it was a beating. It wasn't a shooting. Of a deaf man with MS, and we're just like, you're not even mad anymore. It's like, why is
Yeah,
it we're still. So
look, the one
again,
thing,
it just
and I know we're done, but the one thing you need
mhm.
to keep in mind is Westerners, people in Western Europe and the United States or North America, they've been given a break from history. Okay, throughout human history, war is a normal part of any person's life cycle. Okay, there's always going to be a war. Okay, um, if not you, then your father or your son. But people fought wars all the time. And since World War II, North America and Western Europe have been given a break from this. And you've had three generations now growing up who did not know war and can't imagine it and think that war is a disruption of normal life. Whereas people all over
Or
the
the
world
United
know that,
States,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because we haven't had a war here since the Civil War.
Yes, exactly. So Americans and Western Europeans, when they look at war, they say, What? How can we stop this? Whereas people in most of the world and throughout most of history,
Live with war.
war is part of the pattern of life because it's a necessity. Okay. And so I think there's this kind of disconnect in how Westerners look at this war or other wars all over the globe as as a crisis, whereas for most it's kind of like what you said, here we go again. It's another cycle. It's kind of like having to mow the lawn. Occasionally, you have to go to war because conditions materialize. And so it's here we go again. And it also means that the idea that how can we have peace and we'll no longer have war is something that makes sense to people who lived in Europe and the United States over the past 60 years or 100 years. It hasn't, that thought would not have made sense to anyone living anywhere else throughout human history that we would not have war. It's part of the human condition.
I'm not gonna ask any more questions. I'm not gonna ask more questions because I'll never stop. Um, we gotta when you have time, please
Do it again.
make time for me. Let me know. My questions will only grow in between now and then. Thanks a million, Dr. Guy Chet, super genius, historian, mastermind,
Please
and
stop it.
everything else. Everybody like, subscribe. Do you have a webpage?
Yes, guychet.com.
Yes. So all things Guy Chet, My Brother's Keeper, the complicated relationship between American Jews and Israel, and three other books that we must have the next time you're on. I'm actually going to look and buy all of your books so we can promote those as well.
Yeah. And
But
I need to clarify the My Brother's Keeper, it's not about the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's about the Jewish people and this interesting, tricky relationship between American Jews and Israel and American Jews and Israeli Jews. And of course, it involves also the Arab-Israeli conflict, but it's not about this. So it's yeah, no false advertising.
well, I'm reading and I'm learning, and I'll keep calling you. So
Good.
thank
All right.
you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.